Good evening, and welcome. I'm glad you've made it here, to your quiet shelter against the dark. Sometimes, the best way to silence the real worries of the day is to listen to a different kind of fear, a safe fear, told in a soft voice. Tonight, we have 3 allegedly true, unsettling stories for you, designed to help you relax and drift away, all told to the soothing sound of steady rain. And as always, there will be no mid-roll ads to break the atmosphere. Before you get too comfortable, if you appreciate what we do here, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. I'm always curious to know where our stories are pushing back the darkness. Let me know in the comments what storm you're listening to tonight, real or imagined. And now, check your doors, settle in deep, and let the sound of the rain be your shield against the silence. Let's listen to what the darkness has to say. Our first report tonight comes from the end of the earth, a place of endless ice and a darkness that lasts for months. We travel to a remote research station where a small team is about to discover they are not alone. Our first log entry is from the Anomaly at Ice Station Zebra.
The sun set in October. It will not rise again until March. Here at Ice Station Zebra, you learn to measure time differently. Not in days, but in the slow, creeping descent into a deeper and deeper darkness. We are 4 souls in a small metal habitat, a tiny island of warmth and light in an ocean of ice that stretches for 1,000 miles in every direction. The silence is the first thing you notice, a profound, absolute quiet, so heavy it feels like a physical weight on your ears. My name is Dr. Aris Thorne. I am a geologist. My job is to listen to the ice. I monitor the deep ground sensors, the seismographs, the sonar, all designed to read the slow, ancient story of the glacier beneath us. For 3 months, the story was a boring one. The slow groan of shifting ice, the deep planetary hum of the Earth's crust, nothing more. Until last week. A new signal appeared. It was not an earthquake. It was not the shifting of a tectonic plate. It was a pulse, a perfectly regular, rhythmic pulse once every 73 seconds. Faint but clear. The source was 2 miles directly beneath us in a layer of ice that has been frozen for over 500,000 years. Nothing should be making a sound down there, especially not one with a perfect mathematical rhythm. For days, the 4 of us were buzzing with a manic scientific excitement. We ran every diagnostic. We checked every sensor. The signal was real, and it was not natural. It was a pattern, a message. We could not decipher it, but we knew with absolute certainty that we were listening to something artificial, something buried, something impossibly old. It was the greatest discovery in human history, and we were the only ones who knew. There was only one thing to do. We had to bring it up. The station is equipped with a deep-core thermal drill, a massive machine designed to bring up ice samples from the deep. We recalibrated it, aimed it at the source of the signal, and prepared for the long, slow process of drilling. Yesterday, we began. The great drill hummed to life, its thermal head glowing, and it bit into the surface of the glacier with a low hiss. And in that exact moment, on all of our sensors, the rhythmic pulse that we had been monitoring for a week stopped, and a new sound began. A single, unbroken, low-frequency hum, as if 2 miles below us, in the ancient, frozen dark, something had just woken up.
The drilling was a slow, agonizing process, a few hundred feet a day. For a week, our lives revolved around two things: the slow, steady descent of the drill's depth meter and the constant, unbroken hum from the anomaly below. It was a low, bass frequency that we couldn't hear with our ears, but we could feel it. It vibrated through the metal floor of the station, through the soles of our boots, and up into our bones. It was a sound you felt in your teeth. Sleep became difficult. We all complained of the same dull, persistent headache and the same unsettling dreams. Nightmares of vast, empty spaces and of complex, impossible geometric shapes twisting in the dark. We grew irritable, short-tempered. The four of us, in our small, warm sanctuary, began to feel like prisoners in a cage, and the hum was the sound of the bars rattling. Then, the plants began to die. We have a small hydroponics bay in the science module, a few rows of lettuce and herbs. It is our only piece of a green living world in this endless white. Last night I noticed the leaves were turning a pale, sickly gray, and the roots were no longer growing down into the nutrient solution. They had twisted and were growing upwards towards the ceiling, as if trying to flee from something in the floor, from the vibration, from the hum. This morning, the drill was less than 10 feet from its target depth, and the hum changed. It was no longer a single steady frequency. It began to modulate, to shift. It developed a strange rhythmic quality, a cadence. It was not a voice, but it was something pretending to be a voice. A slow, garbled, monstrous whisper that seemed to speak in a language made only of static and dread. We listened, mesmerized and horrified. Then, at 0400 hours, an alarm blared through the station. I looked at the drill's main monitor. The density reading had plummeted to 0. "Breach! We have a breach!" yelled Moreau, our engineer. The drill had broken through the ice. It was now hanging in an open space, a cavern, 2 miles beneath a solid glacier. And in the exact moment of the breach, on all of our sensors, the terrible whispering hum stopped and was replaced by a perfect, absolute silence that was 1,000 times more terrifying. "The camera is coming online," Moreau whispered, his voice trembling. "We're about to see what's in there."
We stood, huddled around the main monitor, 4 ghosts in the flickering light of the screen. The silence from below was absolute. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Then the camera feed crackled to life. The image was grainy, distorted by the pressure and the distance, but it was clear enough. It showed a cavern, a space so vast our minds could barely comprehend it, and it was not made of ice. The walls were a smooth, black, non-reflective material that seemed to absorb the light from our drill's camera. And in the center of that impossible space floated the source of the signal. It was a colossal crystalline object, a fractal of intersecting planes and impossible angles that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves as we looked. It hurt the mind to try and understand its shape. As the camera's light washed over it, deep fissures began to trace across its surface, like cracks in ancient ice. And from these fissures, hundreds of large, luminous, pale blue eyes began to open. They all swiveled in perfect, silent unison to stare directly into our camera lens, to stare directly at us. The moment they looked, it hit us. It was not a sound. It was a broadcast sent directly into our minds. My own thoughts were gone, replaced by a torrent of alien information, images that were not my own, a sky with two dead suns, feelings that I had never felt, a loneliness so profound it was a physical force, knowledge that I could not comprehend, the birth and death of stars, the taste of dust on 1,000 dead worlds. It was the consciousness of a being that had been trapped, dreaming in the ice for 1,000,000 years, and we had just knocked on its door. I stumbled back from the monitor, clutching my head. Moreau was screaming, a high, thin sound of pure terror. Davies was laughing, a horrible, empty laugh, and Chen was simply staring at a blank wall, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Our minds were not meant to hold such things. We were fragile, broken vessels. This is my last entry. I don't know who will find it. The entity in the ice is not hostile. It is not evil. It is simply vast, and it is awake. The signal has returned, but it is no longer coming from below us. It is coming from our own communications antenna on the roof of the station. It has found a new, more powerful voice, and it is no longer whispering. It is broadcasting outwards, past our moon, past the planets, out into the cold, listening dark of space. It's not a cry for help. It is an announcement. It is telling something else, that after all this time, dinner is finally ready.
We leave the howling winds and the cosmic terror frozen in the ice, and now we descend deep beneath the earth to a place of man-made silence, a concrete tomb filled with the forgotten voices of the past. Our second recording is that of the subterranean archivist.
My specialty is silence, or rather, the sounds hidden within it. I'm an audio archivist. I take old, decaying tapes and I clean them up, preserving voices from the past. The job at the Blackwood Institute was unusual. The pay was exceptionally good, and the contract was ironclad with non-disclosure agreements. The archive was not in a library, but in a decommissioned military bunker 300 feet below the earth, my home for the next 6 months. The place was a concrete tomb. The air was cold, dry, and tasted of old electricity and dust. The only sound was the constant low hum of the air recyclers. My workspace was a small, soundproofed studio connected to the main archive vault. The vault itself was a vast, circular room lined with thousands upon thousands of identical, gray, reel-to-reel tape boxes. The work was monotonous. mostly geological surveys from the 1960s, the dry, monotone voices of scientists describing rock strata. My job was to digitize them and listen for any signs of degradation. For the first month, the only sounds were the voices on the tapes and the hum of the machines. But then, I found the first one, tape 713. The scientist on the tape, a Dr. Alpert, was describing seismic readings, but in the background, underneath his voice, was another sound. Faint. A soft, wet, rhythmic clicking. It wasn't on any of the previous tapes. I put on my best headphones and isolated the frequency. The sound was organic, but it wasn't human. It sounded exploratory, like something small and blind tapping its way through a dark, wet space. I noted it in my log as background interference and moved on. But a week later, on tape 841, I heard it again. It was clearer this time, louder. The clicking was faster, more confident, and it was accompanied by a new sound, a low, guttural purring sound, like a large cat, but with a wet, gurgling quality. I felt a cold unease. These tapes were recorded in a soundproofed studio, just like the one I was in. There shouldn't have been any background noise. Last night I started tape 904. Dr. Alpert's voice was different. It was strained. He kept pausing, leaving long, silent gaps in his report. And in those gaps, I could hear it. The clicking, the gurgling purr. But it was no longer in the background. It sounded close, very close, as if it were in the room with him. Then, in the middle of a sentence, Dr. Alpert stopped talking, and the clicking was replaced by a single, sharp cracking sound, like a large bone breaking. Then nothing. The rest of the tape was just the low, humming silence of an empty, open microphone.
I sat back in my chair, the silence of my own studio suddenly feeling heavy, suffocating. The tape hissed softly on the machine, an empty sound from a dead man's room. I couldn't continue in sequence. I had to know what happened next. I left my studio and walked into the vast, cold vault. I ran my fingers along the spines of the gray boxes, past the 900s into the thousands. The labels changed. The tapes were no longer geological surveys. They were titled Ambient Log, followed by a date. I took the first one, dated the day after the bone-cracking sound, and threaded it onto the machine. It was a recording of the empty studio, a control sample, I assumed. For 10 minutes, there was only the low hum of the 1960s recording equipment. Then, I played the next ambient log. The same hum, but in the background, very faintly, was the sound of the wet clicking. I played tape after tape, each one a new day. With each new tape, the clicking grew louder, more confident. The gurgling purr returned, deeper now. I realized with a cold horror, they weren't just recording rocks, they were documenting this thing. They were studying the sounds it made while it was alone in that sealed room. On the final ambient tape, dated a week after Dr. Alpert's disappearance, the sound was deafeningly clear, as if the creature was standing directly next to the microphone. The clicking was a sharp, aggressive staccato. The purring had become a low, guttural growl. The recording continued like this for 5 minutes, and then a new sound, a wet, heavy slap directly against the microphone. And then perfect silence. The rest of the tape was blank. I found the entries for the tapes I had just played. Next to the final ambient log, there was a frantic, handwritten note from a different archivist the man who must have worked on this project after the scientists were gone. His note was 5 simple, terrifying words. It learns through listening. Do not make a sound. I ripped the headphones from my ears. I slammed the tape machine off. I sat back in my chair, in my own modern, soundproofed studio. The only sound was the low hum of the air recyclers, the same hum I'd heard on the old tapes. And a thought, cold and sharp as an icicle, pierced my mind. I have been down here for a month, making sounds, the clicks of my keyboard, the whir of the tape machines, my own breathing. It learns through listening. And then I heard it. Not from the tapes, from outside my studio door, from the dark, cold concrete hallway of the bunker. A faint, soft, wet clicking. It was no longer in the past. It was not on the tapes. It was here, with me, and it had been listening. The clicking in the hallway stopped. I held my breath, every muscle in my body frozen, and a new sound began. A perfect, wet, gurgling mimicry of the low, steady hum of my own modern air recycler. It had learned the sound of my silence, and then came the soft, wet slap against my own studio door.
And now, for our final tale, we escape the humming silence of the bunker and return to the surface, to a quiet, forgotten valley in the countryside. A place that seems peaceful, but where the harvest is not what it seems. Our final story is found in The Orchard of Faces. I find beauty in decay. My name is Thomas, and I am a photographer of forgotten places. An old abandoned farmhouse, a church with a collapsed steeple, a rusted-out car swallowed by weeds. These are the places that speak to me. They tell stories of lives that have passed. It was the rumor of an old homestead, a place abandoned for a century in a valley no one visits anymore, that led me deep into the countryside. After a long hike through overgrown lanes, I found it, a crumbling gray stone wall covered in ivy, and behind it an orchard. The house was gone, its foundation barely visible, but the orchard remained. The trees were ancient, their branches gnarled and twisted like old hands. But it was not wild. The grass was short, the ground was clear. It felt tended, cared for, and the trees were heavy with fruit. I did not recognize this fruit. Hanging from the low branches were dozens of pale, smooth, gourd-like fruits. Each one was about the size of a human head, with a waxy, almost translucent skin of the palest white-green. They had a faint, mottled pattern on their surface, like the veins in marble. I was captivated. The contrast of the pale, heavy fruit against the dark, twisted branches was eerily beautiful. I raised my camera and began to shoot, the soft click of the shutter the only sound in the unnaturally still air. There were no birds in this orchard, no buzzing of insects, just a profound, peaceful, and deeply unsettling silence. I felt a strange sense of tranquility here, but also the distinct, prickling feeling of being watched. As the sun began to set, casting long, strange shadows through the trees, I packed my equipment. I felt a strange reluctance to leave.
but the feeling of being observed was growing stronger.
Sleep did not come to me that night. I sat in the red glow of the darkroom, the photographs spread out before me like evidence in a crime. Dozens of them, dozens of pale fruits, and dozens of serene, sleeping human faces. Young, old, male, female, all captured in my photos, all hanging from the branches of those ancient trees. A part of me screamed to get in my car and drive, to leave this valley and never look back. But the other part, the artist, the obsessive documentarian, could not. This was the greatest and most terrible story I had ever found, and I had to know its ending. The next day, I went to the small, dusty library in the nearest town. I searched through the archives, the old newspapers, the town records. I was looking for a pattern, and I found one. Unexplained disappearances, stretching back over 150 years. Every few years, like clockwork, someone would vanish from the area. A lost hiker, a traveler just passing through, a child who wandered too far from home. The reports always ended the same way. No trace was ever found. I found a box of old, faded photographs of the missing. I took them back to my hotel room, my hands trembling. With a magnifying glass, I began to compare the faces in the old, grainy photos to the high-resolution images I had taken in the orchard. My breath caught in my chest. A young woman with a distinctive mole on her cheek who had vanished in 1978. There she was, the same serene, sleeping face on a pale gourd hanging from a low branch. A boy with a chipped front tooth, missing since 1992. His face was there too, smaller than the others, looking peaceful in its strange, organic sleep. The orchard was not just growing fruit, it was growing the lost. That night, I felt an irresistible pull to go back. I knew it was madness, but I had to see it one last time, in the dark. I walked the overgrown path under a sliver of a moon. As I approached the crumbling stone wall, I could see a soft, gentle light coming from within. I peered over the wall. The orchard was transformed. Every single fruit was now glowing with a soft, pale, internal luminescence. The entire orchard was a constellation of soft, glowing, sleeping faces. They seemed ripe, and a figure was moving among the trees. It was a tall, gaunt man, dressed in the simple clothes of a farmer from a century ago. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, a wicker basket in one hand and a small curved knife in the other. He was gently, carefully cutting the glowing fruits from the branches and placing them in his basket. It was the harvest. He must have sensed me. He stopped and slowly turned to look at me. His face was not a face. It was a smooth, featureless mask of gnarled, ancient wood. He did not seem angry. He raised a long wooden hand and beckoned me, a slow, gentle gesture. He then pointed with his knife to an old, strong-looking tree nearby, to a branch that was empty. The strange, peaceful feeling of the orchard washed over me again, stronger than ever. The fear began to drain away, replaced by a deep, tired acceptance. I found my feet moving, carrying me over the wall into the soft, glowing light. The gardener was patient. He had all the time in the world, and in his quiet, beautiful orchard, there was always room for one more.